does the compound bow work? Who invented the compound bow, and why was the compound bow invented? Hi, this is the second lecture on compound archery. So let's see, how does the compound bow work? In the compound bow, the pulley cam system grants the user a mechanical advantage, and so the limbs of the compound bow are much stiffer than those of a recurve bow or a long bow. This rigidity makes the compound bow more energy efficient than other bows, as less energy is dissipated in limb movement. The higher rigidity, higher technology construction also improves accuracy by reducing the bow's sensitivity to changes in temperature and humidity. The pulley cam system also confers a benefit called let-off. As the string is drawn back, the cams rotate. The cams are eccentric rather than round, so the effective radius changes as they rotate. Each of a compound bow's two cams features two tracks, an inner track which connects to the opposite limb or opposite cam through cables, and an outer track through which the bowstring runs. As the bow is drawn, the ratio of bowstring payout and cable take up relative to limb weight and leverage of the cams changes. By manipulation of the shapes of these cam tracks, different draw stroke profiles can be created. A compound bow can be soft drawing with a slow build-up to peak weight and a gradual let-off with a long valley at the end. It can also be hard drawing with a very fast build-up to peak draw weight, a long plateau where weight is maintained, and a quick let-off with a short valley. The let-off itself is the result of the cam profiles having passed the center and approaching a condition very similar to a cam lock. In some compound bows, if the draw stop or a draw length modules are removed, they will self-lock at full draw and require professional equipment and professional people to unlock it safely. Many compound bows offer 70-85% let-off once they are pulled to full draw. This allows the shooter to relax and concentrate on the intended target at which they are aiming and shooting. A bow's central mount for other components such as the limbs, sights, stabilizers, and quivers are called the riser. Risers are designed to be as rigid as possible. The central riser of a compound bow is usually made of aluminum, magnesium alloy, or carbon fiber, and many are made of 70-75 aluminum alloy. Limbs are made of fiberglass-based composite materials and are capable of taking high tensile and compressive forces. The limbs store all the energy of the bow. No energy is stored in the pulleys and the cables. Draw weights of adult compound bows generally fall between 40 and 80 pounds. That's about 18 to 36 kilos, enabling arrow speeds of 250 to 370 feet per second, 76 to 130 meters per second. In the most common configuration, there is a cam or wheel at the end of each limb. The shape of the cam may vary somewhat between different bow designs. There are several different concepts of using the cam to store the energy in the limbs, and these all fall under a category called bow eccentrics. Bow eccentrics. The four most common types of bow eccentrics are single cam, hybrid cam, dual cam, and binary cam. However, there are other less common designs like the quad cam and hinged. Cams are often described using their let-off rating. As a cam is rotated, the force required to hold the bow in position reaches a peak and then decreases as the bow approaches maximum extension, a position known as the wall, the final position. The percentage difference between the maximum force encountered during the draw and the force required to hold the bow in full extension is called the let-off. The value is commonly between 65% and 80% of the peak weight for recently designed compound bows. Although some older compound bows provided a let-off of only 50%, and some recent designs achieved let-offs in excess of 90%. As the string is drawn, the cam turns and imparts force to compress the limb. Initially, the archer has the short side of the cam, with the leverage being a mechanical disadvantage. High energy input, therefore, is required. When near full drawn is reached, the cam has turned to its full extent. The archer has gained what is called a mechanical advantage, and the least amount of force needs to be applied to the string to keep the limbs bent. This is known as let-off. The lower holding weight enables the archer to maintain the bow fully drawn and takes more time to aim. This let-off enables the archer to accurately shoot a compound bow with a much higher peak draw weight than other bows. However, there are some youth-oriented compound bows with low draw weights that have no let-off at all and have a maximum draw length deliberately set farther than the majority of young shooters would reach. This effectively makes the bow function very similar like a recurve bow, with a draw length determined by the shooter's preferred anchor point. Now, this removes the necessity to adjust the bow draw length or use a different bow for different shooters, or to change bows as the shooter starts getting older and the draw length increases. An example of this type of bow is the Genesis. That's a good brand, which is a standard equipment for many beginners. Compound bow strings and cables are normally made of high modulus polyethylene and are designed to have great tensile strength and minimal stretchability so that the bow transfers its energy to the arrow as efficiently and as durably as possible. In earlier models of compound bows, the cables were often made of plastic-coated steel. Well, you must have got an idea of how the compound bow functions. I have told you a general view. For those of you who have found my narrative fast, I tried my best to be slow and could not follow the language clearly. Please rewind and listen again. You can plug on a headphone and keep listening to all of this lecture lesson many times till you understand it well. For those of you who still have doubts, I will clarify your doubts in the direct practical sessions in your own language. Now let's see who invented the compound bow. Or let's see the history of the compound bow invention. Hollis Wilbur Allen Jr., an American inventor and manufacturer, maybe the most unsung inventor in history. In the mid-1960s, Allen took a device, the bow, that had stood relatively unchanged for several thousand years and transformed it into a more powerful, more accurate device, shooting faster arrows with less effort from the archer. Allen invented the compound bow. The hunting bows of his day, recurve bows or long bows that looked very much like bows used during the 100 Years' War, required about 70 pounds of force to draw the string called draw weight, and shot arrows with a velocity of perhaps 175 feet per second, that is FPS. The most inconvenient feature of such a bow was that you had to maintain that 70 pounds of draw while trying to aim at a target. 70 pounds, which was very difficult to do, very, very difficult to do. So Allen read some books on physics, learned all about energy storage and the transfer, and tried to find a better way to take the energy of the draw and store it more efficiently in the bow limbs, while reducing the continuous effort required from the archer to hold it. He found he could do this by adding pulleys and extra cables to the limbs of the bow, which allowed the draw power to be constant rather than gradually increasing as the long bow. And he also found a way to arrange the pulleys so that the weight of the draw was greatly reduced during the last part, so that one could aim the bow without straining at the same time to keep the bowstring under tension. Using physics as his guide, Allen built bows equipped with cables and wheels to act as force multipliers to boost arrow speeds. He eventually crafted an effective design and introduced the Allen compound bow to the market in 1967. Allen patented his compound bow in 1969, if I'm right. That early four-wheel compound didn't fare well commercially. So Allen joined hands with another designer, and this guy's name was Tom Jennings, to make improvements to the design. Jennings and Allen released the Model T in 1974. This met with a huge commercial success. It was absolutely sensational. That wildly popular bow had only two wheels and was lighter and easier to shoot. In 1974, eight companies were making compound bows. Just 3 years later, several more manufacturers emerged, and together they offered archers over 100 models of compound bows. The compound bow evolved rapidly to expand Allen's wish to boost arrow speed while decreasing the amount of strength required to achieve greater speeds. Many of the early compound's limbs featured solid fiberglass or a combination of wood and fiberglass. Today's limbs might use carbon, fiberglass, or composite materials. Those early limbs also stood nearly vertical, while today they are more parallel. Modern designs generate greater arrow speeds with less vibration. The early compounds, cams, were small, round wheels. They served their function but grew larger over time and took on oblong shapes to increase let off and further boost arrow speeds. Martin's archery, dynamo in the late 1970s, was the first single cam bow. Its lone cam mounted to the bottom limb, which was more of a rigid aluminum arm. Two cables connected to the cam, stretching up to the maple and glass top limb. The top limb was the bow's only part that flexed. The single cam eliminated the need to synchronize two cams. Another company, Matthews Archery, revolutionized the single cam bow in the 1990s by using a wheel on the top limb to control the string movement. Those solo cam bows matched the speeds achieved by dual cam bows, but with less hand shock. Simply put, they shot nicely. The compounds cables which work with the cams and the draw force multipliers were actually strands of steel cable until the early, 1990s. Today's cables are actually twisted strands of synthetic fibers just like any bowstring. These fiber strands are just as strong as steel cables, mind you, but lighter and less expensive. Well, the other advances include the move from wooden risers to aluminum and carbon risers. Some companies in the 1990s also built risers with magnesium. Grips on the risers also shrank. The compounds, early wood, plastic, or molded ingots were so massive they filled even large hands. Those big grips also created hand torque, all too very often. Competitive archers quickly recognized this problem and removed or filed down those grips. Today's slim grips combat torque very effectively. The connection systems on limbs also improved drastically from those early years. When some limbs pivoted right or left, today's bows have pockets that seat limbs soundly and securely. Speaking of limbs, those initial one-piece models had forks cut into the tips to allow the cams to roll. Split limbs are now the norm. They create a wider limb stance to improve efficiency and reduce vibration. Tuning compound bows is also getting very, very easier these days. In the past 2 years, Elite Archery introduced its simplified exact tuning technology. Which lets the archer pivot the entire limb pocket to fix right to left tears in paper tuning. Then again, another company, Bowtech, also launched this deadlock cam system, which lets archers turn a screw to drive the cam right or left on its axle to fix tuning issues. It's hard to think of another invention that has transformed its domain so radically like Allen's compound bow. Allen lived to see the bow revolution begin, but he died in a very tragic car accident in Montana in 1979. Before the effect of his invention had been fully felt. Well, so much for today's lesson, or today's lecture or session. Let's quickly revise what we have covered in today's lesson. In the first part, we revisited how the compound bow works and the physics and principles behind its mechanical advantage. And in the second part of this lecture, we looked at the history of how the compound bow was invented and who was that amazing person who invented this most enjoyable sports and hunting archery equipment ever made in the universe, the compound bow. The compound archers of India must be very, very thankful to H.W. Allen for making the beautiful thing called the compound bow that has propelled them to international stardom. Well, thank you so, so very much. You made my day if you stayed till the end of this lecture. Catch you in the next session. Bye. This is who? Om. What's that? Olympic medal, nothing but the Olympic medal in archery. Bye-bye.